Hello there. Skilling Open Quarterfinals. We have a big match coming up. Hikaru Nakamura against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Now Maxime played well on day one. Small upset perhaps for some, but Maxime is obviously very strong. And he managed to beat Hikaru in the first game out of the 4. And the others were drawn, so Maxime takes day 1. So, fortunately there's day 2, even though in an interview on his own channel, Hikaru didn't know the format and thought he was out of the tournament. But there is day 2, and Hikaru will have to win this 4-game mini-match against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave to force the tiebreak. And let's see how that went. And we are going to start with game 1, where Hikaru had white, and he opened with e4, and we had a Sicilian, as is to be expected. MVL almost always plays the Najdorf. Plays the Najdorf against e4, Grunfeld against d4. Very principled and active player. Okay, so we have the Najdorf indeed, and here Hikaru chooses the 10th most popular move, bishop d3. Seems like people are either tired of trying to get something in the main lines, which MVL knows like the back of his palm, or people want to try to surprise him with the sidelines and hope to find something there. So MVL plays the principal Najdorf move, e5 here, and Nakamura goes back. We have a normal development, knight c3, and well, black setup is geared towards playing what he played now, d5. That's what he did, d5. But now comes the pin, bishop g5. And we have trade on e4, knight takes e4, bishop e7. And now Hikaru takes with a bishop on f6. I guess ideally black would like to take here, but knight h5 looks like a strong move when the bishop can't move and we're forcing either a double pawn or winning a pawn. So MVL took with a pawn. Now queen h5, this stops black from playing f5, we're controlling that square. And after this, now we want to attack this pawn, and we're coming in with a knight. So you can't play f5, I'll play knight f6 check and then take your pawn. So MVL, well, he ditched the pawn, going for activity. He likes to do that, obviously, in the Grunfeld and the Najdorf. He doesn't mind chucking a pawn here or there for activity. And here actually he just takes the pawn back. But let's see if that's a healthy pawn. Knight f5. Now Hikaru eliminates the bishop pair. He centralizes his rooks. His position looks quite good. This pawn is under attack. We have knight back to c6, and now Hikaru takes a pawn. He's up a pawn, and he has a big trump, which will now be revealed quite soon. He backs up with the queen, unpinning the bishop. So now the bishop can move back, which it does. Bishop to e4. MVL doubles, and Hikaru refuses the trade. And turns out that this doubling of the rooks is kind of useless. I mean, you double the file, but then what? Queen g3, and now the trump, h4. This pawn is super dangerous, and it's a fast runner. Can you stop it? I don't think so. King a8, h5. What you gonna do about the pawn? Okay, might as well go for some counterplay, but killer move now by Hikaru. Bishop to d3. Trapping the rook, and well, we already have this dangerous pawn, but this simple threat of knight e4 is just deadly. This rook is not coming out. This guy right here, and it's gonna drop. So a fantastic win by Nakamura. Now in the second game, the second game was drawn, and again Nakamura has white now in the third game of the second mini match. If he wins here, he can actually get the tiebreak immediately. And well, we have the same opening as in game 1, but now MVL goes for g6, bishop g5, the pin again, and now bishop h6. He can't castle just yet, buddy. Knight c4, bishop at d2, and now h5. The knight jumps into a d5, and we get this typical structure where black has given up the bishop pair, but has this this structure and the pawns here, and white will very often try to expand on the queen side. Knight b8, heading to d7 eventually. Solid structure, but Nakamura seems to have a nice plan here. a5, a3, and black seems to lack activity a little bit here. He plays b6, bishop c2. This bishop might even reroute here to c6 and settle down there. h4, trying to get some activity. Takes, and clearly at this stage MVL felt this position was quite cramped. This might be incoming. The bishop stands well here, and we can further penetrate on the queen side. So he decided to play b5, close this diagonal and get some activity for his knight, get this square and attack this pawn. Once white takes here, this might become weak. So that's his plan. First he played queen b8, hitting the pawn. Nakamura did not want to allow him to take it, played bishop d3, and now knight b6. He wants this pawn, he gets it, but at what cost? After bishop h6, the rook must move if you don't want to sacrifice the exchange, and now bishop c4 is very strong. And the pressure with the queen and the bishop is too much for this knight. You can play this move, but then I simply increase the pressure with the rook. The knight has to move, and then this pawn here is going to drop. So MVL saw nothing better than to sack the exchange. Nakamura brought the bishop back, covering the pawn, and now it's just a matter of technique. He's up the exchange, which is strong, as we'll learn. It should be, at least. And yeah, it should be a matter of technique here. It takes the pawn on h4. MVL gets one back, but there's a check here. The knight is attacked. Now moves to g3. Sorry, bishop g5 first, hitting this, giving us time to play rook c1, attack, and now finally knight g3. Yeah. But this is quite hopeless for black. Some further moves, b5. If you take it, you lose control of c8, and we can play bishop h6, followed by even knight f5 and rook c8. Very strong. So not many moves to go here. Queen to f6. There's a check here. Otherwise we'd have this nice tactic, takes, and takes. But first rook e1, covering this square. And then Nakamura finished it up with a nice move here at the end, rook c7, allowing the rook to be captured. But there's queen d8 check, and then we take the knight, and lights out. So right away, game 3, 2.5 for Nakamura, and he forced the tiebreak. And we are going to have a look at the tiebreak. And the first game, we have pawn to e4. Now, in the first game, we're now on tiebreaks. Let's set that up. MVL had white in the first game, so I'm gonna have the names correct. Hopefully, yep, like this. So MVL against Nakamura, and MVL opened with e4. So this is a tiebreak. It's a 2-game blitz match. MVL white here in the first game. We have an Italian. Seen this many times before. We're just gonna go through the moves fast. Normal moves. Quiet Italian with c3, rook e1, and I guess we're gonna see this maneuver here, knight here, here, and here. Standard stuff. a5, that or a6 we've been seeing. So this now, and either you take, which should be fine for black with rook on f8, or you play bishop b5, keeping the bishop, and now knight d7. We've seen this all before. Once the knight loses control of d4, white can actually play d4 and hit him in the center. Takes, bishop goes back. We've seen very similar stuff before, if not exactly the same. And now d5 by Nakamura, striking back in the center and playing knight to e4. Now white can indeed take this knight, but he's giving up a lot of squares. We can even play this, immediately take, and then take this pawn immediately, or set it up a little bit and then take the pawn. So bishop d3 was preferred, and now we have a trade. Bishop g4, bishop back to c2, perhaps eyeing some battery here, but there's always bishop f5. c5 now by Nakamura, trying to break up the center a little bit. Bishop e3, and yeah, this game seemed to be heading in kind of a quiet direction. We saw some trades here. Bishop takes f3, knight c6, f4, knight b4, and after all of this, we have a heavy piece endgame. But white trying to target this weakness, perhaps. Black going for counterplay, hitting the pawn on b2, queen e3, hitting the rook, queen c6, getting out of the pin, and now MVL goes for active operations. f5. He wants to target the king side, and that's indeed what happened after rook c2. f6, starting active operations on the king side. But Nakamura said, "I'll take your pawn. Show me what you got." And is he able to show him something? That's the question. He took on g7. Nakamura took another pawn. You take a pawn, I'll take a pawn. He's up a pawn. MVL tries to bring a rook around, but if he doesn't mate, black has tremendous pawns that should decide the game. Rook c4. We get one pawn back, but black is now pushing. King h2. King is vulnerable on the back rank, and black is pushing. Queen f6 was played, trying to get into black's position. Rook c1, pinning this rook because of the mate. Rook f3, closing the diagonal. Now this is actually on pre, but then we take this, and there's danger here. But Nakamura had rook h1, intending to take and then take on f3 if you take on h6. But there is a tactical flaw which MVL spotted and exploited. Fantastic stuff. He took on h6. The rook can be taken with check, but king g1. The mate seems inevitable unless we can make luft, and that's what Nakamura did. f6. But look at this, queen h8, king f7, and now this super fantastic move. Sort of reminds me, he finds these tactics with pawns. He found g4 on day one, now he finds e6. Take with the rook, there's going to be a queen. Take with the king, the rook is hanging with jack. If king e7, we can promote, take on e8 and then promote. And that's actually what happened. King e7, he takes on e8, promotes, and he's going to make another queen after this check, and e7, his king is safe, there's no perpetual. Recurring d1, there's going to be another queen. So now the pressure once again on Nakamura, and we are going to change up the names once again. Nakamura has the white pieces now in the second game of the tiebreaks, and he's again behind, and he needs to be clutch again. He needs to win on the spot, nothing else, and if he wins, he gets an Armageddon game. Surprisingly, he opens up with d4 in this tiebreak game. I say surprisingly because he had great success with this bishop d3 line against the Najdorf twice, so one would expect him to test MVL again, but no, we have the Trompovsky attack, d5, e3, and we have principled approach here by MVL, c5, and heading straight for the pawn of b2 since we have the bishop outside the pawn chain. Nakamura plays queen to c1, and solid development here by MVL, principled line. But usually in this, when we have the bishop on f4, it's the London, so it's very similar here. Against the London, we'd like to go here, but I guess we can't do it here because bishop takes f6 would be available. So MVL prefers knight b to d7. Some further moves, knight h4, bishop to e4. Now if we take this, pawn takes, and the knight is a little bit offside. We actually see similar in the game. After a4, a6, bishop e2, h6, Nakamura had to take because bishop back simply allows g5. So you have to accept this trade. Now he takes on e4, and whenever that happens, this square is covered. This knight is vulnerable. This is threatened. We need a square. So g3. Square for the knight. A bishop to e7. Both sides castle and queen to c2. MVL now brings the rook to the half open files. Rook 8 to c8. Well, it's about to be half open. Rook after d1, rook after d8. Rook ac1, Nakamura does the same, and after the trade we have these half open files. Knight d5. Active knight, and because the knight is hit, white has to move it. f5 by MVL. He seems to be doing everything right here. Queen b1, and now look at this. Bishop g5. Hitting the rook. Hitting the rookster here. Rook c2. The rook had to move, and now queen to b3. Hitting the pawn. And Nakamura moves the pawn, only to end up shaking his head in absolute disgust as yet again MVL comes up with a gorgeous tactic, knight b4. This knight can't be taken. We have a rook here on c8 hitting the rook on c2. So he decides to bring the rook back and take the bishop for the rook, losing the exchange, and this should be a losing position for Nakamura. We saw him convert the exchange up, and now all MVL needs to do is actually just hold the draw. He doesn't even have to win. So Nakamura needs nothing short of a miracle. It's not enough to get an equal position. He needs to win, and he's down the exchange here and doesn't seem to have any active possibilities. So okay, I mean, he has to keep going. He plays f3, bishop takes f3, queen b5, rook to e1, trying to get some activity. Rook to e8. I mean, white doesn't even have a pawn from the exchange. Queen a2. Just trying to holding on to this pawn. Maybe setting up some c4 ideas, but there's always knight b4. So still it's looking grim. King h8. Prophylactic move by MVL, who seems to have everything under control here in this match. Rook e7. Knight h4 though. We have a threat. King h7. Still everything looks well under control. Nakamura needs to find something. We have repetition here, and what's going on? He gets a pawn here. So MVL loses his focus. He loses the focus, and Nakamura gets one pawn. So there is hope. He's still down the exchange for only a pawn, but now he's starting to get great activity, seemingly out of thin air. So maybe MVL got a little bit too passive, because now he has to look out. We have a queen trade, but despite the queen trade, bishop d3. Big pawn. If he wins this pawn, it's equal material, and the white's pieces are very active. So MVL defends. We attack the rook. Attack the knight. Not a great square for the knight. And now rook d7. And, you know, a lot of threats. Threatening this pawn. We might be able to play g4. Hit this. What's going on? Passive rook. Rook d6. Okay, MVL doesn't mind the repetition, and Nakamura now places the rook on a b6, again hitting the pawn. So MVL can also reposition. He defends now on the 7th rank. Nakamura brings the king. Knight back to d5. Rook d6. Knight to e7. Still, okay, look, starting to look a lot better for Nakamura here. He's definitely not worse. He's probably better at this point, but he still needs to win. Knight c6, b4. Look at this knight, very strong knight, and the pawns are rolling. Still we have this pin here. No g4 yet. I'm wondering if that ever comes. Probably not after g6. No, h4 instead. Knight back to e7. Bishop c4 hitting the rook. Rook g7. So tough defense here for MVL, but he's holding on still. Nakamura needs to find the knockout blow, and he's not doing that at the moment. But can he do it now? Knight. Where does the knight go? Knight c8. And look at this. Rook takes g7. King takes g7. Bishop d5, eyeing this pawn. And I guess MVL thought that he would take the pawn, but bad news, he did not take it. Knight e6. Check, the rook is gonna drop. And huge sigh of relief from Nakamura, who Yeah, celebrated this. Yeah, there was no doubt he was happy. And now, guess what? We have Armageddon, baby. Okay. I don't want to spoil the Armageddon, guys. So, how can we do this? Okay, what I will do here is I will... so you don't see the final position. We'll do it like this. Get the Armageddon. Okay. It wasn't spoiled anyway, but I didn't want to take any chances. And we have to change the names again because in the Armageddon... okay, my names actually got mixed up there. But let's do it like this. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Hikaru Nakamura. No, we do it like this. No, this. Sorry. Got confused there. I'm so excited. I just can't hide it. We have Armageddon. The first Armageddon of this tournament. Armageddon. Okay, guys. Are you ready? This will decide for all the marbles. So MVL with white and Hikaru with the black pieces. This is for all the damn marbles. E4. The marbles being qualifying for the semifinals, but it's still there's a lot of money on the line here. Okay, MVL with white, E4. Guess what? You want to guess it? I think it's the Italian. It is the Italian. Castles, knight f6. Okay, I'm gonna go fast here. We've seen these types of moves before. Actually, we've seen exactly these types of moves before. Knight goes back. Now we can play d4. That's what we do. Takes, bishop b6. Knight g3 now. Again, Nakamura goes for at d5. Again, we have knight e4. I'm not looking at the same game. No. Bishop d3. Knight takes, pawn takes. Bishop g4. Yeah, this wasn't played in the other game. Yeah, he played it in the other game. Bishop c2, c5. We have takes, bishop e3, rook c8, he takes. And let's just go quickly. We get a similar position, very similar, but in this game, MVL gets this knight on d4. Big difference. Big difference. This knight on d4 is a huge piece. Can he do enough with it? This piece lacks targets. Remember, this is Armageddon. So black gets draw odds, but white gets more time. So all that Nakamura needs to do is to draw the game. He plays queen b6. b3, protecting the pawn. Doubles, king h2 by MVL. Queen b4. And now queen e3 by MVL. I'd personally prefer at some stage just to play f3, push it back. Let's say f3, rook c3, queen d2. Looks like black has, white has some nice dark square control, and hopefully we can do something from here. Instead, MVL played queen e3, which is probably okay. It goes to f4 with the queen. Rook e to d1. But of course, Nakamura is trying to liquidate. He plays a4, a little not a minority attack, but kind of, yeah. Even though he has an extra pawn here, this a pawn is trying to create a weakness with these pawns. So a single army, the a pawn, trying to create some weaknesses. Knight takes f4. Okay, protecting the pawn. If you take on d5, we take on b3, and we probably don't want the rook ending. So MVL takes on a4. And he's now up a pawn. That's the good news. The bad news is that the pawns are doubled and on the same file, which is what double pawns usually are on, right? So rook c2, king g1, rook a8, rook d4, trying to hold on to the pawn, but after rook c4 he decides, well, I can't really do that because, well, he's just going to take here, and we don't want to take here and give black a nice c pawn. So rook back to d2. Now Nakamura takes, eyeing this pawn. Is it going to be enough? 92. Eyeing this blockade again. If we can get that, that's pretty nice. But Nakamura says, no blockade today, buddy. And plays d4. And after this, he gets the pawn on a2. So that's a good trade for Nakamura. He gets rid of the isolated pawn and gets this pawn. So can MVL win the b pawn and use the kingside pawn majority? Tall order, especially after the rook trade, which just happens here. Bishop back to d5 and the rook trade. The king comes into the center and another rook trade. Now it's going to be really difficult, but can MVL do it? King to e3, b5, stopping the pawn. Can we win the pawn and go for perhaps a pawn ending, a pawn up? Nakamura goes for the pawn on g4. We have to bring the king to defend it, try to create something, but now probably a strong move by Nakamura. Or is it g5? We have to take it and g5. Takes. Not a lot of pawns left, guys. Not a lot of pawns left. So MVL needs all he can get here. And yeah, he threatened a big fork, but Nakamura did not fall for it. Now he's trying to go for the b pawn. Nakamura defends. And the problem is if you go with the king, to c5, black just waits. And once you take, the king is coming, picking things up. So what can we do really? We can hope for king e6, check, take the bishop, but that didn't happen. King f7, e6, but now it's different because it's a pawn and Nakamura can actually go for this. Nicely spotted. He can sacrifice the piece because he's going for the pawn. Now what do you do? If you go with the king, I attack your knight, I take your pawn. So you have to bring the king and hope your knight can stop the pawn, but the bad news for MVL is that the knight can stop the pawn, but you can't improve the position in any way. And after knight b1, the king is simply coming. He tries to block, but white can't make any progress here. King g4, king f2, king f5. The knight is completely stuck, trying to defend the pawn, and the king can't make headway on his own to win the pawn without losing his own pawn. So a draw. Heartbreak for MVL. He should have won in the tiebreak, but I mean, chess, especially blitz chess, it's an unforgiving game, and MVL found out the hard way this time around. So great saves by Nakamura. Clutch. I mean, he blundered badly in the tiebreak, but he kept his cool and won his way back into the game despite being down the material, and earned the win. So well done, Hikaru Nakamura, who is now in the semi-finals. So what a match. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, why not smash a like for the old fellow here, working his behind off here to bring you 20 videos in 5 days from this exciting tournament. I would really appreciate that, guys. Thank you, and see you soon.